So this is the preamble of USPAP. I'm taking the Certified General Appraiser Exam, and I realized that USPAP was a difficult area for me according to my test results when I didn't pass. So I bought the book and I'm making this recording. The purpose of this is the preamble. The purpose of the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP, is to promote and maintain a high level of public trust in appraisal practice by establishing requirements for appraisals. It is essential that appraisers develop and communicate their analysis, opinions, and conclusions to intended users of their services in a manner that is meaningful and not misleading. The Appraisal Standards Board promulgates USPAP for both appraisers and users of appraisal services. The appraiser's responsibility is to protect the overall public trust, and it is the importance of the role of the appraiser that places ethical obligation on those who serve in this capacity. USPAP reflects the current standards of the appraisal profession. USPAP addresses the ethical and performance obligations of appraisers through definitions, rules, standards, rules, and statements. The definitions establish the application of certain terminology in USPAP. The ethics rule sets forth the requirements for integrity, impartiality, objectivity, independent judgment, and ethical conduct. The record-keeping rule establishes the work file requirements for appraisal and appraisal review assignments. The competency rule presents pre-assignment and assignment conditions for knowledge and experience. The scope of work rule presents obligations related to problem identification, research, and analysis. The jurisdictional exception rule preserves the balance of USPAP if a portion or contrary to law or public policy of a jurisdiction. The standards establish the requirements for appraisal and appraisal review and the manner in which each is communicated. Standards 1 and 2 establish requirements for the development and communication of real property appraisal. Standards 3 and 4 establish requirements for the development and communication of appraisal review. Standards 5 and 6 establish requirements for the development and communication of a mass appraisal. Standards 7 and 8 establish requirements for the development and communication of a personal property appraisal. Standards 9 and 10 establish requirements for the development and communication of a business or intangible asset appraisal. There are currently no active statements on appraisal standards. Comments are an integral part of USPAP and have the same weight as the component they address. These extensions of the definitions, rules, and standard rules provide interpretation and establish the context and conditions for application. When do USPAP rules and standards apply? USPAP does not establish who or which assignments must comply. Neither the Appraisal Foundation nor its Appraisal Standards Board is a government entity with the power to make, judge, or enforce law. An appraiser must comply with USPAP when either the service or the appraiser is required by law, regulation, or agreement with the client. Individuals may also choose to comply with USPAP at any time that individual is performing the service as an appraiser. In order to comply with USPAP, the appraiser must meet the following obligations. An appraiser must act confidently in a manner that is independent, impartial, and objective. An appraiser must comply with the ethics rule in all aspects of appraisal practice. An appraiser must maintain the data, information, and analysis necessary to support his or her opinions for appraisal and appraisal review assignments in accordance with the record-keeping rule. An appraiser must comply with the competency rule and the jurisdictional exception rule for all assignments. When an appraiser provides an opinion of value in an assignment, the appraiser must also comply with the scope of work rule, the record-keeping rule, the applicable development and reporting standards, and applicable statements. When an appraiser provides an opinion about the quality of another appraiser's work that was performed as a part of an appraisal or appraisal review assignment, the appraiser must also comply with the scope of work rule and the record-keeping rule, applicable portions of Standards 3 and 4, and applicable statements. There are currently no active statements. When preparing an appraisal or an appraisal review that is a component of a larger assignment with additional opinions and conclusions or recommendations, the appraiser or appraisal review component must comply with the applicable development and reporting standards and applicable statements. There are currently no statements. and the remaining component of the assignment must comply with the ethics rule and competency rule and the jurisdictional exception rule. Definitions. Defined terms are intended to clarify the meaning of words or phrases in USPAP that differ from or are not found in popular English dictionaries, and, in a few instances, to indicate which popular dictionary definition is meant to be used if there are multiple definitions. For the purpose of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, the following definitions apply. Appraisal, the act or process of developing an opinion of value, adjective, or pertaining to appraising and related functions such as appraisal practice or appraisal services. Comment, an appraisal is a numerically expressed as a specific amount, as a range of numbers, or as a relationship, not more than, not less than, to a previous value indication or numerical benchmark. Appraisal practice, valuation services performed by an individual acting as an appraiser, including but not limited to appraisal and appraisal review. Appraisal practice is provided only by appraisers, while valuation services are provided by a variety of professionals and others. The terms appraisal and appraisal review are intentionally generic and are not mutually exclusive. For example, an opinion of value may be required as a part of an appraisal review assignment. Appraisal review, noun, the act or process of developing an opinion about the quality of another appraiser's work that was performed as a part of an appraisal or appraisal review assignment of or pertaining to an opinion about the quality of another appraiser's work that was performed as a part of an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. Appraiser, one who is expected to perform valuation services competently and in a manner that is independent, impartial, and objective. Such expectation occurs when individuals, either by choice or by requirement placed upon them or upon the service they provide by law, regulation, or agreement with the client or intended users, represent that they comply. Appraisers' peers, other appraisers who have expertise and competency in a similar type of assignment. Assignment, a valuation service that is provided by an appraiser as a consequence of an agreement with a client. Assignment conditions, assumptions, extraordinary assumptions, hypothetical conditions, laws and regulations, jurisdictional exceptions, and other conditions that affect the scope of work. Assignment results, an appraiser's opinions or conclusions not limited to value that were developed when performing an appraisal assignment, an appraisal review assignment, or valuation service other than an appraisal or appraisal review. Comment, physical characteristics are not assignment results. Bias, a preference or inclination that precludes an appraiser's impartiality, independence, or objectivity in an assignment. Business enterprise, an entity pursuing an economic activity. Business equity, the interest and benefits or rights inherent in the ownership of a business enterprise or part thereof in any form, including, but not necessarily limited to, capital stock, partnership interests, cooperatives and sole proprietorships, options, and warrants. Client, the party or parties who engage the appraiser by employment or contract in a specific assignment, whether directly or through an agent. Confidential information, information that is either identified by the client as confidential when providing it to an appraiser and that is not available from any other source, or classified as confidential or private by applicable law or regulation. Cost, the actual or estimated amount required to create, reproduce, place, or obtain a property. Credible, worthy of belief. Comment, credible assignment results require support by relevant evidence and logic to the degree necessary for the intended use. Effective date, the date to which the appraiser's analysis, opinions, and conclusions apply, also referred to as the date of value. Exposure time, an opinion based on the supporting market data of the length of time that the property interest being appraised would have been offered on the market prior to the hypothetical consummation of a sale at market value on the effective date of the appraisal. Extraordinary assumption, in a market-specific assumption as of the effective date regarding uncertain information used in the analysis which, if found to be false, could alter the appraiser's opinions and conclusions. Comment, uncertain information might include physical, legal, or economic characteristics of the subject property, or conditions external to the property, such as market conditions or trends, or the integrity of data used in the analysis. Feasibility analysis, a study of the cost-benefit relationship in an economic endeavor. Hypothetical condition, a condition directly related to a specific assignment, which is considered, which is contrary to what is known by the appraiser to exist on the effective date of the assignment results, but is used for the purpose of analysis. Comment. Hypothetical conditions are contrary to known facts about physical, legal, or economic characteristics of the subject property, or about conditions external to the property, such as market conditions or trends, or about the integrity of data used in analysis. Intangible property. Non-physical assets, including but not limited to franchises, trademarks, patents, copyrights, goodwill, equity, securities, and contracts as distinguished from physical assets such as facilities and equipment. Intended use. The use of an appraiser's reported appraisal or appraisal review assignment results as identified by the appraiser based on communication with the client at the time of the assignment. Intended user. The client or any other party as identified by name or type as users of the appraisal or appraisal review report by the appraiser based on communication with the client at the time of the assignment. Jurisdictional exception. An assignment condition established by applicable law or regulation which precludes an appraiser from complying with a part of USPAP. Market value. A type of value stated as an opinion that presumes the transfer of a property, right of ownership such as a bundle of rights, as of a certain date under specific conditions set forth in the value definition that is identified by the appraiser as applicable in the appraisal. Comment. Appraisers are cautioned to identify the exact definition of market value and its authority applicable to each appraisal completed for the purpose of the market value. Mass appraisal, the process of valuing a universe of properties as of a given date using standard methodology, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. Mass appraisal model, a mathematical expression of how supply and demand factors interact in a market. Personal inspection. The appraiser's in-person observation of the subject property performed as a part of the scope of work. For an appraisal review assignment, the reviewer's in-person observation of the subject of the work under review performed as a part of the scope of work. An appraisal's personal inspection is typically limited to those things readily observable without the use of special testing or equipment. Appraisals of some types of properties, such as gems and jewelry, may require the use of specialized equipment. A personal inspection is not the equivalent of an inspection by an inspection professional, structural engineer, home inspector, or art conservator. Personal property. Any tangible or intangible article that is subject to ownership and not classified as real property, including identifiable tangible objects that are considered by the general public as having personal, such as furnishings, artwork, antiques, gems and jewelry, collectibles, machinery and equipment, and intangible property that is created and stored electronically, such as plans for installation, art, chorography, emails for, or designs for digital tokens. Physical characteristics, attributes of a property that are observable or measurable as a matter of fact, as distinguished from opinions and conclusions, which are the result of some level of analysis or judgment. Price, the amount asked, offered, or paid for a property. Comment, once stated, price is a fact, whether it is publicly disclosed or retained in private, because of the financial capabilities, motivations, or special interest of a given buyer or seller. The price paid for a property may or may not have any relation to the value that might be ascribed to that property by others. Real estate, an identified parcel or tract of land, including the improvements, if any. Real property, the interest, benefits, and rights inherent with the ownership of real estate. Report, Any communication, written or oral, of the appraisal or appraisal review that is transmitted to the client or a party authorized by the client upon completion of an assignment. Scope of work. The type and extent of research and analysis in an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. Signature. Personalized evidence indicating authentication of the work performed by the appraiser and the acceptance of the responsibility for content analysis and the conclusions in the report. Valuation service. A service pertaining to an aspect of property value, regardless of the type of service and whether it is performed by an appraiser or by others. Value. The monetary relationship between properties and those who buy, sell, and use those properties, expressed as an opinion of the worth of a property at a given time. Comment. In appraisal practice, value will always be qualified. For example, market value, liquidation value, or investment value. A work file, documentation necessary to support an appraiser's opinions, analysis, and conclusions. The ethics rule. An appraiser must promote and preserve the public trust inherent in appraisal practice by observing the highest standards of professional ethics. An appraiser must comply with USPAP when obligated by law or regulation, or by agreement with the client or intended users. In addition to these requirements, an individual should comply any time that individual represents that he or she is performing the service as an appraiser. Comment. This rule specifies the personal obligations and responsibilities of the individual appraiser. An individual appraiser employed by a group or organization that conducts itself in a manner that does not conform to USPAP should take steps that are appropriate under the circumstances to ensure compliance with USPAP. This ethics rule is divided into 4 sections: non-discrimination, conduct, management, confidentiality, which apply to all appraisal practice. Non-discrimination. An appraiser must not act in a manner that violates or contributes to the violation of federal, state, or local anti-discrimination laws or regulations. This includes the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. An appraiser must have knowledge of anti-discrimination laws and regulations when those or regulations apply to the appraiser or to the assignment. An appraiser must complete an assignment in full compliance with applicable laws and regulations. An appraiser, when completing a residential property assignment, must not base their opinion of value in whole or in part on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or familial status. Comment. The FH Act prohibits discrimination, I think that's the Fair Housing Act, discrimination in residential real estate appraisals on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or familial status. Under the Fair Housing Act, an appraiser may not use or rely upon information relating to these protected characteristics with limited exceptions. The Fair Housing Act can be violated through disparate treatment, treating individuals of one protected group differently from the less favorability than others not in that protected group. The disparate impact employing neutral policies or practices that disproportionately harm members of a protected group, except when those policies or practices are justified, and there is no less disproportionate policies or practice that could be used instead. Section 1981 of the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits many forms of discrimination with respect to the making and enforcing of contracts. And Section 1982 of the same law prohibits discriminations with the respect of purchasing, leasing, selling, holding, and conveyance of real and personal property. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 applies to real property appraisals, in addition to personal property and other appraisals. An appraiser, when completing an assignment where the intended use is in connection with a credit transaction, not limited to credit secured by real property, must not base their opinion of value in whole or part on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, source of income, or the good faith exercise of rights under the Consumer Credit Protection Act. Comment. ECOA prohibits discrimination in any aspect of credit transaction on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, source of income, and good faith exercise of any right under the Consumer Credit Protection Act in any aspect of a credit transaction, with limited exceptions. An appraisal used in connection with a credit transaction is an aspect of a credit transaction. An appraiser must not violate any state or local anti-discrimination laws or regulations applicable to the appraiser or their assignment. Comment: state local laws may expand upon federal anti-discrimination requirements to protect additional characteristics and or protect additional practices. The specific laws and regulations that are applicable to an appraiser or an assignment will vary. Whether or not any anti-discrimination law or regulation applies. An appraiser must not develop and or report an opinion of value that in whole or part is based on the actual or perceived race, ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, gender expression, marital status, familial status, age, receipt of public assistance, income, or disability of any persons. Comment: within the context of the non-discrimination section of the ethics rule, persons includes, but is not limited to, a property or asset owner, a purchaser or potential purchaser of a property or an asset, an individual who might derive benefit from or use a property as an asset, a client representative or agent of a client or any other intended user, or the inhabitants of a geographic area. 2. An appraiser must not base an opinion of value on the premise that homogeneity of the inhabitants of a geographic area is relevant for the appraisal. 3. An appraiser must not perform an assignment with bias with respect to the act or perceived race, ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, gender expression, marital status, familial status, age, receipt of public assistance, income, or disability of any persons. Number 4, an appraiser must not use or rely upon another characteristics, such as a pretext to conceal the use or reliance upon race, ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, gender expression, marital status, familial status, age, receipt of public assistance, income, or disability of any persons when performing an assignment. Comment: where an anti-discrimination law or regulation applies to the appraiser or the appraiser's assignment, the practices described in numbers 1 through 4 immediately above may also be prohibited by applicable anti-discrimination law, including the Fair Housing Act, ECOA, and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Any practice prohibited by an applicable anti-discrimination law or regulation is also prohibited by the preceding requirements of a non-discrimination section. If an assignment does not involve residential real property and the intended use is not in connection with a credit transaction, the Fair Housing Act and ECOA do not apply. If the Fair Housing Act and ECOA do not apply and no other law or regulation prohibits the use of or reliance upon a protected characteristic, then the use of or reliance upon that characteristic is permitted only to the extent that it is essential to the assignment and the necessary for credible assignment results. Comment: where the Fair Housing Act, ECOA, and other anti-discrimination laws or regulations apply, any use of or reliance upon a protected characteristic must be expressly permitted by applicable laws or regulations. Conduct: an appraiser must perform assignments with impartiality, objectivity, and independence, and without accommodation of personal interest. An appraiser must not perform an assignment with bias, must not advocate the cause or interest of any party or issue, must not agree to perform an assignment that includes the reporting of predetermined options or conclusions, must not misrepresent his or her role when providing valuation services that are outside of the appraisal practice, must not communicate assignment results within the intent to mislead or defraud, must not use or communicate a report or assignment results known by the appraiser to be misleading or fraudulent, must not knowingly permit an employee or other person to communicate a report or assignment results that are misleading or fraudulent, must not engage in criminal conduct, must not willingly or knowingly violate the requirements of the record-keeping rule, and must not perform an assignment with a grossly negligent manner. Comment: Development standards address the requirement that an appraiser must not render appraisal services in a careless or negligent manner. The above requirement deals with an appraiser being grossly negligent in performing an assignment, which would be a violation of the conduct section of the ethics rule. If known prior to agreeing to perform an assignment and/or if discovered at any time during the assignment, an appraiser must disclose to the client and in each subsequent report certification any current or prospective interest in the subject property or parties involved, any services regarding the subject property performed by the appraiser as an appraiser in any other capacity within the 3-year period immediately preceding the agreement to perform the assignment. Comment. Disclosing the fact that the appraiser has previously appraised the property is permitted except in the case when an appraiser has agreed with the client to keep the mere occurrence of a prior assignment confidential. If an appraiser has agreed with the client not to disclose that he or she has appraised a property, the appraiser must decline all subsequent agreements to perform assignments that fall within the 3-year period. In assignments in which there is no appraisal or appraisal review report, only the initial disclosure to the client is required. Management. An appraiser must disclose that he or she paid a fee or a commission or gave a thing of value in connection with the procurement of an assignment. Comment. The disclosure must appear in the certification and any transmittal letter in which conclusions are stated. However, disclosure of the amount paid is not required. In groups or organizations engaged in appraisal practice, intra-company payments to employees for business development do not require a disclosure. A appraiser must not agree to perform an assignment or have compensation arrangement for an assignment that is contingent upon any of the following: the reporting of a predetermined result, a direction in the assignment results that favors the cause of the client, the amount of the value opinion, the attainment of a stipulated result, that the loan closes or taxes are reduced, etc., the occurrence of a subsequent event directly related to the appraiser's opinions and specific to the assignment's purpose. An appraiser must not advertise for or solicit assignments in a manner that is false, misleading, or exaggerated. An appraiser must affix or authorize the use of his or her signature to certify recognition and acceptance of his or her USPAP responsibilities in an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. An appraiser may authorize the use of his or her signature only on an assignment-by-assignment basis. An appraiser must not affix the signature of another appraiser without his or her consent. An appraiser must exercise due care to prevent unauthorized use of his or her signature. An appraiser exercising such care is not responsible for unauthorized use of his or her signature. Confidentiality. An appraiser must protect the confidential nature of the appraiser-client relationship. An appraiser must act in good faith with regard to the legitimate interest of the client in the use of confidential information and in the communication of assignment results. An appraiser must be aware of and comply with all confidentiality and privacy laws and regulations applicable to the assignment. An appraiser must not disclose confidential information or assignment results to anybody other than the client, parties specifically authorized by the client, state appraisal regulatory agencies, third parties as may be authorized by due process of law, or a duly authorized professional review committee, except when such disclosure to a committee would violate applicable law or regulation. An appraiser must take reasonable steps to safeguard access to confidential information and assignment results by unauthorized individuals, whether such information or results are physical or electronic form. An appraiser must ensure that employees, coworkers, subcontractors, and others who may have access to confidential information or assignment results are aware of the prohibitions on disclosure of such information or results. A member of a duly authorized professional peer review committee must not disclose confidential information presented to the committee. Comment. When all confidential elements of confidential information, the assignment results are removed through redaction or the process of aggregation, client authorization is not required for the disclosure of the remaining information as notified.